What's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today we're going to be doing a Mekk-Knight deck profile. So this deck is a very interesting deck that has probably one of the most interesting summoning mechanics I've ever seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you have to have two cards in the same column to actually special summon them, regardless if it's your column or your opponent's column. So it's a really neat deck that actually plays super cool, and actually has a weird place in the meta where it just somehow randomly every so often will pop up and be the tier 1 deck for a little while, and then it just falls off the map, which is really amazing to me that this deck stays consistent. It kind of reminds me of Burning Abyss, that it's just very timeless. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell on there so you can come part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below, because you got some awesome rewards you guys are like getting your name searched for every single video, getting a side card sent in the mail, or even getting a requested deck profile every single month that you're a patron, along with test hand. So without further ado guys, let's get straight on into this. So first off, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Mekk-Knight Blue Sky. So what I was mentioning in the intro of the actual deck profile is they do have a really interesting effect that all your Mekk-Knight monsters share, except for the Mekk-Knight Orcus monster, which share the ability that if you control 2 or more monsters, or if there are 2 or more cards in the same column, then you can special summon this card from your hand in that column. And you can only special summon each of the Mekk-Knights once per turn. And then all the Mekk-Knights have individual effects. Like for instance, Blue Sky has the ability that if this card is normal or special summon from your hand, then you can add a Mekk-Knight cards from your deck to your hand with different names, except for Mekk-Knight Blue Sky from your deck to your hand, equal to the number of cards your opponent controls in this card's column. So for example, your opponent can have a maximum of 3 cards, with the extra monster zone, the main monster zone, and then the spell and trap card zone. So this card can essentially net you 3 searches, which is pretty good. We then play 3 copies of Mekk-Knight Purple Nightfall. So Mekk-Knight Purple Nightfall is a really good card, and was actually the reason I wanted to even pick this deck up, was because I loved Purple Nightfall's like artwork. And it has the ability that you can quick effect target a Mekk-Knight monster you control, banish it until the next standby phase of the next turn, and if you do, you get to add a Mekk-Knight monster from your deck to your hand, which is pretty cool just to be able to grab a Mekk-Knight card from your deck to your hand really quickly. We then play 2 copies of Indigo Eclipse, aka the Shifty Boy, because he has the ability to move from main monster zone to main monster zone. So for instance, when you play with Mekk-Knights, you have to think in 1 to 5. For instance, that's the way I think about it, is you have column number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you can move this card from column 1 to column 2 if you want to, because it says that once per turn you can quick effect target a Mekk-Knight monster you control and move that target to another column in your main monster zone. So you can move it from column 1 to column 3, from column 1 to column 5, from 5 to 4. It just depends on where you need it to be, or where you need your copy of Yellow Star, which yes, I do play Yellow Star in this deck. This card has the ability to be able to pop a spell or trap in the same column as it, which is really helpful because this card can move the Yellow Star to a column that it needs to be able to pop a spell or trap on your side of the field. Same thing with Red Moon. Red Moon actually pops a monster on the field that's face up, so you can use these cards with your copy of Indigo Eclipse to pop additional cards, or you can move your copy of Indigo Eclipse out of the way so you can special summon the copy of Red Moon or Yellow Star to his zone, to the column that he was in, to be able to pop cards on the field, which is pretty helpful. We then play 3 copies of Girsu the Orcus Mekk-Knight, which is probably my favorite out of them all. Maybe Purple Nightfall and this one are my favorite. Just for the lore, I think I probably love Girsu the most, because it's just an insanely lore-heavy card, and it's just really cool. That if this card is normal or special summon, you get to send an Orcus or a World Legacy card from your deck to the graveyard. And if there are 2 more cards in this card's column, you can treat this card as a tuner as well, which you don't really do that often, especially not in this deck. And if there is no other cards, no other monsters, if you control no other monsters, then you can special summon a World Legacy token, machine type, level 1, 0/0, to both players' fields in defense position, which is pretty cool that it gives you a token, but it's also really cool because it sends your World Legacy cards from your deck to the graveyard. For example, sending your copy of World Chalice to the graveyard, because this card has a really cool effect that if this card is special summon, if a monster is special summoned from the extra deck, then you contribute this card and then send that monster to the graveyard. And then also, if this card is normal summoner set, leaves the field, you can special summon 1 World Chalice monster from your deck. And during your main phase, except the turn this card was sent to the graveyard, you can banish this card from your grave to add a World Legacy card from your deck to your hand. And it also helps you with your IB, the World Chalice Keymaster to be able to go for the additional play with her, which is super helpful. We then play a single copy of World Armor. World Armor comes in handy as well because you usually bring this card back with like your copy of, I usually do at least, I usually bring it back with my copy of Monster Reborn or World Legacy Succession once I search it. But the reason I play this is because you're either going to send your copy of World Armor or your World Chalice from your deck to the graveyard off your copy of the Orcust Mekk-Knight, which is still pretty good. But basically you just send it to the graveyard and then you bring it back, and it has really cool effects that you can quick effect target one face of monster your opponent controls that was special summon from the extra deck and return both that monster and this card to your hand. And when a monster is flipped face up, you can special summon this card from your hand, and then if this card is normal or special summon, then you get to add a World Legacy card from your deck to your hand, which is the big effect of this card, that if you bring it back from the graveyard, it gets you a search, which is pretty good. We then play 2 copies of Gameciel because Gameciel helps you out getting monsters in the exact column you need, and it gets over opponent's monsters, which is pretty helpful. We then play 2 copies of Nibiru because 2 Gameciel, 2 Nibiru kind of helps with any situation in this deck because you can tribute all the monsters on the field, or you can just pick one that you need. It just depends on what monster you end up with in your hand, and it just is overall really nice to have 4 outs to really big boards. We then play 3 copies of Ash Blossom as well for 3 additional hand traps to be able to stop our opponent from special summoning from the deck, sending from hand, or adding cards from the deck to the hand, or sending a card from the deck to the graveyard. It's just an overall really good card, as you guys probably know. And then 2 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit has a really good effect that when a monster on the field activates its effect, or when a spell or trap card on the field is already faced on the field activates its effect, then you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard and then destroy that card on the field, which is pretty cool to get you an additional pop as well on top of the Red Moon. So that's it for the monsters, guys. Let's get into the spells. So for the spells, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Pot of Extravagance comes in ridiculously handy in this deck because Pot of Extravagance, like, you don't really need all the cards in the extra deck. Like, Morningstar is really good, and your copies of the Girsu is really good in the extra deck, but you don't really need all the cards in your extra deck. So you just play this in the deck because it gets you additional draws, and then you can banish 6 of your cards from your extra deck face down to be able to draw 2 cards. We then play a single copy of Monster Reborn. Oh, did I say 1? I meant 2. You play a single copy of Monster Reborn, and you also play a single copy of World Legacy Succession. World Legacy Succession is actually searchable by a lot of means in this deck, and it's probably one of the best World Legacy cards in the entire deck that has the ability that lets you target a monster in the graveyard and special summon it to a zone a link monster points to, which is pretty helpful. We then play a single copy of Mind Control because it can take a monster off our opponent's field and use it as a link material on our side of the field to be able to go into copies of like Mekk-Knight of the Morningstar or different cards in your extra deck that you might particularly need. Play a single copy of World Legacy Key. World Legacy Key has a really neat effect that lets you target one of your banished Mekk-Knight monsters or World Legacy cards and add it from back to your hand, and then you can negate any trap effect that activates in the same column as a Mekk-Knight monster you control, which is really cool, and I really like that effect to be able to negate trap effects. We then play 3 copies of World Legacy Memories for the last 3 spells, which is probably one of the craziest spells in the entire deck that lets you special summon a Mekk-Knight monster from your hand or deck in defense position, but return it to your hand during the end phase. So it's a little bit better than a searcher because it lets you special summon it to your side of the field instead of adding it from your deck to your hand, which is really cool. But for the rest, turn out this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except for Mekk-Knight monsters, which is again not that big of a deal because usually you're just summoning Mekk-Knight monsters during your turn anyways. Then that's it for the spells, guys. Let's get into the traps. So for the traps, we're going to be playing a single copy of World Legacy Whispers. World Legacy Whispers lets you negate any monster effect that's in the same column as a Mekk-Knight monster, which is the big effect of this card, and also has the ability that when this card is activated, you can target a level 5 or higher monster on the field, and it gains 1,000 attack and defense until the end of the turn, and then it basically becomes skill drain for Mekk-Knight monsters, which is pretty good, to be able to just put your Mekk-Knights in the same column as a monster, and they effects negate it for the rest of the game, for that particular monster, as long as the Mekk-Knight remains on the field in the same column as it. We then play 2 copies of World Legacy Secrets, which is basically like Call of the Haunted, because it has the ability that when this card is activated, you target a level 5 or higher monster in your graveyard and special summon it, and then when this card leaves the field, destroy that monster, and you negate any spell effect that is activated in the same column as a monster. Or excuse me, you negate any monster effect that is in the same column as a Mekk-Knight monster you control, which is pretty cool. I like that effect. This one negates spell effects, and then this one negates the monster effects, excuse me. Those two can always kind of mix me up. And then for the last 3 cards of the deck, we're playing 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, which is a really good card in this deck to be able to give you an additional 3 hand traps in this deck, because if you weren't playing enough hand traps already. This deck plays a ridiculous amount of hand traps, which is why I think it keeps sneaking into the meta as well, because you're playing the 2 Gamma Skills, which is 2 Kaijus, you're playing 2 Nibiru's, which is 2, you're playing the 3 Ash, which is 5, and then you're playing the 2 copies of Ghost Ogre, which is 7, and then you have the 3 Impermanence as well, which carries you to 10 hand traps, which you're probably going to open between 2 and 3 hand traps every game. Usually. I usually open up at least 2 every time I play this deck, which I've been playing this deck actually a lot recently because it's just really insane and really kind of rogue and fun. So that's it for the main deck, guys. Let's get into the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're going to be playing 3 copies of the Mekk-Knight of the Morning Star. This card's really good and it helps out the deck quite a lot. I wish more people would read this card because they let this go through and I'm like, okay, I win. Because what this card does is if this card's link summon, you get to discard a Mekk-Knight or a World Legacy card to add a World Legacy card from your deck to your hand. And you can only use the effect of this card once per turn. And then if a Mekk-Knight monster battles an opponent's monster in the same column as it, your monster cannot be destroyed by battle and you take no battle damage from it. So basically it can run over any single monster that's in the same column as it, and it gives all of your other Mekk-Knights that blanket effect, which is pretty cool. We then play 2 copies of Mekk-Knight Spectrum Supreme. Spectrum Supreme is really a good card. It can attack your opponents directly, which is pretty cool. And if this is the only card in its column, and then if this card is in the extra monster zone and it points to no monsters, it cannot be destroyed by card effects, and also your opponent cannot target it with card effects. And you can send 1 card your opponent controls to, or you can send 1 card you control in this card's column to the graveyard to special summon a Mekk-Knight monster from your deck in defense position, which gets you an additional monster on your side of the field. This card is ridiculously good, and I really wish that people would, again, learn to play around this, because I just hit you for 3k, which is really funny. We then play 2 copies of the Mekk-Knight Crusadia Avramax. Avramax is really good because it can help me punch through a lot of stuff, because it's just a really good boss monster in this deck, and I really like playing it as a 2 of. You usually don't summon as much. I usually just go for Morning Star, but it's there if you need it. We then play a single copy of Unicorn and a single copy of Phoenix in case you need to spin stuff or in case you need to pop spells or traps. They do come in quite handy for that when you do need them. And then for the other monsters that we're playing in the extra deck, we are going to be playing 2 copies of Lib the World Key Blade Master. This card's really good, and the card I was talking about earlier. They can only be link summoned while you have a World Legacy card in your graveyard, which you have plenty of them in the extra deck, or plenty of them in the main deck, that are going to go to the graveyard pretty quickly. And it also has the ability that during your main phase, you can set a World Legacy spell or trap from your deck, but it cannot be activated and you have no World Legacy cards in your graveyard. And it also has the ability, if this link summon card is sent to the graveyard as a link material, you can shuffle 1 card on the field into the deck that does not target. That is really good. And then we play 2 copies of Galatea, the Orcust Automaton. This card is really good too, because she has the ability that if this card is on the field, if it's co-linked, then it cannot be destroyed by battle. And then you can banish 1 machine monster, or you can target 1 of your banished machine monsters, shuffle it in the deck, which you're never going to do. Basically, the only reason you play this card is to go into Girsu, but it takes 2 monsters, including an Orcust monster, and thank goodness the Mekk-Knight Orcust Girsu exists, because you can use Orcust Girsu to go into this card with the token, and once you go into that, you can immediately go into your copy of Dingirsu, the Orcust of the Evening Star, which has the ability to be able to send a card your opponent controls to the graveyard, any card that they control, and it's 2600 beat stick, which is really good. So basically you just link into this, and then you finally link into this, but you can also make this legitimately by going with 2 level 8 monsters, which is pretty good. Just in case you hit with Pot of Extravagance, you hit all of your copies of Galatea, you do still have the option to go into this card legitimately, which is pretty good. So that's it for the deck, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. It's probably turning into one of my favorite decks, to be honest with you guys, because it's the deck that I play like online the most with, and the deck that I like play a lot with nowadays. It's really fun and really weird at the same time, and it's kind of rogue. Like, a lot of people don't expect it, and a lot of people have kind of forgotten about Mekk-Knights in the meta with all the stuff that's running around right now, and this deck is really good still. Like, I really recommend that you guys pick it up because it's really fun, and it's just an overall good deck. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell near so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely tell me what you think of this deck down in the comments down below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.